Bright Duty. Every student matters.
Welcome to another lecture. And in this class, we are going to begin with the third chapter of your book, which is written by Mahatma Gandhi, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, and M.K. Gandhi in short. And the name of this chapter is Imitating the English Gentleman. Now, imitation, as the name suggests, imitation means to copy someone. Who was Gandhiji trying to copy as represented by him in this chapter? He was trying to copy an English gentleman. We all know that Gandhiji was a man of principles. There were a few principles that we still follow, and we still try to imbibe those principles in us as much as we can. Be it the principle of non-violence, truth, vegetarianism, and there are multiple things that we always promoted, that we always talked about, and this chapter is one of those. So this is about a short stint of Gandhiji, his stay, where his friend wanted him to become an English gentleman. Gandhiji had swore that he is going to become a vegetarian, and he was reading all these books in which vegetarianism and the positives of this were being talked about. So Gandhiji at first, after being influenced from his friend, decided to imitate, decided to copy and become an English gentleman by learning how to dance, by learning how to speak in French. But then he later on decided and he realized that all such things are not going to help him. These things hardly matter. What matters is what you are within, the true self. Because imitation can take place for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, maybe 10 days at max. But later on, you cannot wear this and go on in life throughout. Your inner self, your true self is actually going to come into the picture. So this is exactly what Gandhiji has taught us through this chapter. So let us start reading this chapter now. Okay. So my faith in vegetarianism grew on me from day to day. Saul's book whetted my appetite for dietetic studies. I went in for all books available on vegetarianism and read them. One of these, Howard Williams' The Ethics of Diet, was a biographical history of the literature of humane dietetics from the earliest period to the present day. It tried to make out that all philosophers and prophets from Pythagoras and Jesus down to those of the present age were vegetarian. So Gandhiji says that my faith, my belief in vegetarianism grew on me day to day. So with each passing day, his belief in the fact that vegetarian food was the best for him, that being a vegetarian was the healthiest thing that he could have done, this thought was taking toll on him. This thought was completely overpowering him, was overshadowing him. Saul's book whetted my appetite for dietetic studies. Whetted my appetite. Appetite means hunger. So he read a book which was written by Saul. This book was written on dietetic studies. Dietetic means, study related to diet. So when he read this book, his appetite, his hunger, his curiosity for vegetarianism actually whetted. It increased. I went in for all books available on vegetarianism and read them. So he confesses that after that he read almost all the books available on this topic. One of these was written by Howard Williams, and the name of the book was The Ethics of Diet. And this was a biographical history of the literature of human dietetics from the earliest period to the present day. So in this book, Howard Williams had actually talked about the changes that had come over in the diet of a human being from the earliest periods of history to the present day. So what all changes had come over, he was talking about that. It tried to make out that all philosophers and prophets from Pythagoras and Jesus down to those of the present age were vegetarians. Almost all the popular people that Gandhiji had read about or knew about, for example, Pythagoras, we all know he's a Greek mathematician. So from Pythagoras to Jesus Christ, everybody was a firm believer in vegetarianism. Dr. Anna Kingsford's The Perfect Way in Diet was also an attractive book. Dr. Allinson's writings on health and hygiene were likewise very helpful. He advocated a curative system based on regulation of the dietary of patients. Himself a vegetarian, he prescribed for his patients also a strictly vegetarian diet. The result of reading of all this literature was that dietetic experiments came to take an important place in my life. Health was the principal consideration of these experiments to begin with, but later on, religion became the supreme matter. So he further talks about multiple books on dietetic practices, on vegetarianism in this paragraph. He says that Dr. Anna Kingsford had written a book. The name of that book was The Perfect Way in Diet. And he found this book to be equally attractive. He found this book worth reading. Then Dr. Allinson had written on health and hygiene. And this again was found to be very useful by him. He advocated a curative system based on regulation of the dietary of patients. Dr. Allinson advocated, he talked about the fact that somebody who actually wants to get healthy, the curative system, one can cure himself, one can one can help himself come out of all the ailments provided they take care of their diet. Himself a vegetarian, he prescribed for his patients also a strictly vegetarian diet. So, Allinson always recommended vegetarian food to his friends. The result of reading all this literature was that dietetic experiments came to take an important place in my life. So Gandhiji accepts that since he read all these things about vegetarian food and diet, so what happened was these things started taking a toll on his life. They started taking a good control on his life. Health was the principal consideration of these experiments to begin with, but later on, religion became the supreme matter. So he tells us that at first, the principal consideration, the most important thing that he emphasized upon was health, but later on, his inclination, his, support system and everything, that seemed only one thing, and that was religion. So his attention moved from health at first to religion in the later stages. Meanwhile, my friend had not ceased to worry about me. His love for me led him to think that if I persisted in my objections to meat eating, I should only develop a weak constitution, but should remain a duffer because I should never feel at home in English society. When he came to know that I had begun to interest myself in books on vegetarianism, he was afraid lest these studies should muddle my head, that I should fritter my life away in experiments, forgetting my own work and become a crime. You see, Gandhiji tells us about one of his friends. He says that my friend did not cease to worry about him. Cease means stop. So his friend was very, very worried about him. His love for me led him to think that if I persisted in my objections to meat eating, I should not only develop a weak constitution but should remain a duffer. So what he believed was, his friend believed that if Gandhiji would continue, persisted means if he continued to object eating meats, I should not only develop a weak constitution, so he believed that his constitution, his state of mind would not be developed entirely, and that Gandhiji would continue to remain a duffer. He would continue to remain a fool because he would never feel at home in an English society, because he would never be able to adjust in an English society, neither would the people of England be able to accept him. So, English and British is all about eating meat. So, they're all non-vegetarian people. And Gandhiji's friend is worried that if Gandhiji would continue with this vegetarianism, he would not be accepted by the people in England. When he came to know that I had begun to interest myself in books on vegetarianism, so when his friend got to know that Gandhiji had started taking a lot of interest in books related to vegetarianism, he was afraid, he was scared, lest these studies should muddle my head. Muddle means confused. So he was worried that if he would continue to read about these things, he is going to constantly read about these topics, his head is going to muddle up. He is going to be all confused. He is going to go crazy. That I should fritter my life away in experiments. Fritter means waste. He thought that Gandhiji was going to waste his life in such experiments, in things related to diet and vegetarianism, and forget my own work and become a crank. He thought that this way he is going to actually forget the reason why he has come here. The major reason for him to come there was to study. So he is going to forget about his work and will become very, very eccentric. He will become very strange, very odd. He therefore made one last effort to reform me. He one day invited me to go to the theatre. Before the play, we were to dine together at the Holborn restaurant. To me, a palatial place and the first big restaurant I had been to since leaving the Victoria Hotel. The stay at that hotel had scarcely been a helpful experience, for I had not lived there with my wits about me. So Gandhiji tells us that his friend wanted to make one last effort to reform me. Reform means to change. So his friend wanted to change Gandhiji. He wanted to make Gandhiji a normal man. So what did he do? He did just one last thing. He invited Gandhiji to go with him to a theatre. But before going to the theatre, they had planned that they are going to go to Holborn restaurant. For Gandhiji, this place was palatial. Palatial word is derived from the word palace. So this restaurant was as big and as royal as a palace. And the first big restaurant I had been to since leaving the Victoria Hotel. So Gandhiji initially lived in the Victoria Hotel, which was again a very big hotel. And ever since he left that hotel, this was the first big place he was going to. The stay at that hotel had scarcely been a helpful experience, for I had not lived there with my wits about me. At times this happens with each one of us, for that matter, when you do not expect something to happen and that does happen with you. It takes some time for you to get accustomed to it, for your brain, for your mind to settle down, to get settled to that thought. So Gandhiji was a very simple man. We all know this about him. He was not in the least used to living in such big places with such aristocratic treatment given to him. So when he lived in the Victoria Hotel, he says that his stay there was not in the least useful because all through the while he was not in his senses. So he really could not get any good experience from his stay. The friend had planned to take me to this restaurant, evidently imagining that modesty would forbid any questions. And it was a very big company of diners in the midst of which my friend and I sat sharing a table between. So Gandhiji says that my friend planned that he's going to take me to this restaurant. Evidently means clearly. So the only purpose behind his friend, wanting to take Gandhiji to this big restaurant was because he thought that modesty would forbid any question. That there, when Gandhiji will sit in the middle of people who are so rich, who are such big people, sitting in the middle of them, Gandhiji is not going to question about anything. He is readily going to accept, he is readily going to eat whatever is given to him. So, being in the middle of those people will make Gandhiji feel so modest, will make Gandhiji feel so small that he would be forbidden, that he would not be able to ask anything from his friend and would accept everything very, very calmly. He says that, when they went to the restaurant, they could see big company of diners. So all the people who had come to that restaurant, they were all very big people. And there in the middle, Gandhiji and his friend were sitting, sharing a table between us. So this is how we usually sit in a restaurant, two people and then a table between. The first course was soup. I wondered what it might be, but dared not ask the friend about it. I therefore summoned the waiter. My friend saw the movement and sternly asked across the table what the matter was. With considerable hesitation, I told him that I wanted to inquire if the soup was a vegetable soup. So Gandhiji tells us that the first course, the first meal that they had was that of a soup. I wondered, Gandhiji was wondering, Gandhiji was thinking what that soup was actually made of, but he could not dare to ask his friend. He just did not have the courage to ask his friend about it. I therefore summoned the waiter. Summon means to call. So he therefore called the waiter. His friend saw that Gandhiji was calling the waiter and very sternly, with a lot of firmness, with a lot of strictness and anger, he asked Gandhiji what the matter was. With considerable hesitation, so Gandhiji hesitated, but then he ended up telling his friend that he just wanted to ask the waiter if this soup was a vegetarian soup or not. You are too clumsy for decent society, he passionately exclaimed. If you cannot behave yourself, you'd better go. Feed in some other restaurant and await me outside. This delighted me. Out I went. There was a vegetarian restaurant close by, but it was closed. So I went without food that night. I accompanied my friend to the theatre, but he never said a word about the scene I had created. On my part, of course, there was nothing to say. So, when Gandhiji told his friend that he wanted to inquire whether the soup was vegetarian or not, his friend screamed at him, his friend scolded him and said that you are too clumsy for a decent society. That in such a decent, such a rich place, you are not the right person to be brought at such a place. He said that if you cannot behave yourself in this place, then it is better you leave. He said, go out, feed in some other restaurant and then wait for me outside. The moment Gandhiji got this green signal from his friend, he got very, very happy. So this delighted him. This made him very happy. Out I went. There was just one restaurant, one vegetarian restaurant, but that was also closed. So poor Gandhiji had to be without food for that night. Later on, he accompanied his friend to the theatre. So as they had planned, they went to the theatre. But his friend did not say anything about the scene that they had created in the restaurant. And Gandhiji obviously did not have anything to say. So he kept quiet. That was the last friendly tussle we had. It did not affect our relations in the least. I could see and appreciate the love by which all my friends' efforts were actuated, and my respect for him was the greater on account of our differences in thought and action. So he says that that was the last friendly tussle we had. Tussle, fight. So the friendly fight, the last friendly fight that Gandhiji had with his friend, he says that it did not affect their relationship at all. I could see and appreciate the love by which all my friends' efforts were actuated. He says I could very well see that the only reason why my friend fought with me or why my friend behaved with me in that manner was because he loves me, because he cares for me. And he says, Gandhiji says that I appreciate the kind of love that my friend has for me. And my respect for him was all the greater on account of our differences in thought and action. You know, this is a very popular saying in English that opposites attract each other. So Gandhiji over here confesses that whatever difference they had, he and his friend were totally different people with respect to their viewpoints, with respect to their actions. And this difference actually increased the amount of love and care that they had for each other. But I decided that I should put him at ease, that I should assure him that I would be clumsy no more, but try to become polished and make up for my vegetarianism by cultivating other accomplishments which fitted one for the polite society. And for this purpose, I undertook the all too impossible task of becoming an English gentleman. So, Gandhiji decided that he is going to help his friend. He wanted to give this surety to his friend that he is not going to be clumsy anymore, that he will not be this difficult to handle anymore, but rather he would become polished, he would become very respectable, well-groomed, well-mannered and everything. And he would make up for his vegetarianism by cultivating other accomplishments. Other accomplishments means he says that if, usually what happens, if there is one flaw, there is one problem with somebody, the person would want to do something so good that that problem is going to be overshadowed. Right? This is exactly what Gandhiji thought of. He thought that if he cannot start eating meat, if he has vowed to be a vegetarian, then let that be. He is going to inculcate in himself such habits, such changes he will bring over that he would become an English gentleman, that he would fit into this polite and this rich society. And for this purpose, he said, I took up this all too impossible task. So according to him, becoming an English gentleman was totally impossible, but he still decided to do that. Okay. The clothes after the Bombay cut that I was wearing were, I thought, unsuitable for English society. And I got new ones at the army and navy stores. I also went in for a chimney pot hat costing 19 shillings, an excessive price in those days. Not content with this, I wasted £10 on an evening suit made in Bond Street, the centre of fashionable life in London, and got my good and noble-hearted brother to send me a double watch chain of gold. So now he talks about all the changes, all the things he did in order to get into this English society. He says that first, whatever clothes, the Bombay cut clothes means the clothes that he had got for himself from Bombay, he decided that those clothes were totally unsuitable for this English society and got new clothes for himself from the army and the navy stores. He then went in for a hat. Chimney pot hat is a big hat which, if you can see in the pictures of Gandhiji also. So chimney pot hat is just a type of hat which Gandhiji bought for 19 shillings. Now shillings, in those days was not that big a currency. Okay? But obviously for people like Gandhiji who started earning, for them those shillings were also a very great amount. So for him those 19 shillings was actually a very excessive amount he had to pay for that hat. Not content with this, he was still not satisfied with this, and he says that I wasted £10 on an evening suit made in Bond Street. So he went out, he wasted almost £10 on an evening suit which was made in the Bond Street, the centre of the fashionable life in London, and got my good and noble-hearted brother to send me a double watch chain of gold. Not only was he changing his clothes, but forced his brother, whom he describes as good and noble-hearted, kind-hearted brother, to send him a watch made of gold. It was not correct to wear a ready-made tie, and I learnt the art of tying one for myself. While in India, the mirror had been a luxury, permitted on the days when the family barber gave me a shave. Here, I wasted 10 minutes every day before a huge mirror, watching myself arranging my tie and parting my hair in the correct fashion. My hair was by no means soft, and every day it meant a regular struggle with the brush to keep it in position. Each time the hat was put on and off, the hand would automatically move towards the head to adjust the hair. Not to mention the other civilized habit of the hand every now and then operating for the same purpose when sitting in polished position. So, he tells us that till now he was wearing a ready-made tie. But he thought that wearing a ready-made tie was again something which was not acceptable. So he started learning the art of tying a knot. He also tells us that when he was in India, the mirror had been a luxury. Looking into a mirror was something which was not common. Only on the days when the barber would come to give them a haircut, to give them a shave, would they get a chance to look into the mirror. But here, every day, he says, I wasted 10 minutes in front of the mirror, watching myself, arranging my tie, and then parting my hair, arranging my hair in the correct manner. My hair was by no means soft. So Gandhiji says that I did not have a very good quality of hair. And every day it meant a regular struggle with the brush to keep it in position. So every day he has to use the brush in order to keep them intact. He also says that whenever I would take off my hat, the next thing that I would do was my hand would automatically go to my hair in order to adjust it. So when we wear the hat and then when we take it off, the quality of our hair also changes. So he would adjust his hair so that he would not look bad. Not to mention the other civilized habit of the hand every now and then operating for the same purpose when sitting in the polished society. He says, not only did my hand go to my hair in order to adjust them, but there were a lot of other civilized, a lot of well-mannered things that I started doing with my hands, especially when I was sitting with a polished society, especially when I was sitting with people who were very, very polite and who were very rich and aristocratic in nature. As if all this was not enough to make me look the king, I directed my attention to other details that were supposed to go towards the making of an English sentence. I was told it was necessary for me to take lessons in Latin, French and eloquence. French was not only the language of neighboring France, but it was the lingua franca of the continent over which I had a desire to study. I decided to learn dance, to take dancing lessons at a class and paid down £3 as a fees for a term. I must have taken about 6 lessons in 3 weeks, but it was beyond me to achieve anything like rhythmic motion. I could not follow the piano and hence found it impossible to keep. He says that this was not enough. I directed my attention to other details. So, apart from just dressing himself up, using his hands in a very civilized manner, there were other things that Gandhiji decided to do in order to learn to sit with a civilized society. I was told, Gandhiji was told that in order to gel very well with the English society, one should learn how to dance very well, should take French lessons and elocution. Elocution means the art of speaking, When one speaks, the tonal quality, the pitch, the volume and everything comes under elocution. So these were the 3 things that Gandhiji was told mattered the most in an English society. French was not only the language of neighboring France, but it was the lingua franca of the continent over which I had a desire. He says that French was not only the language which was spoken by the people of France, but this was the lingua franca. Lingua franca means the base language which was spoken by the people of that continent. The people did not know any other language, but they always knew French. So this was the most common mode of conversation that you could strike with the people. And Gandhiji had the desire to travel across this continent, so he had to learn French. He decided to take dancing lessons also at a class, and he paid £3 for one term. He confesses that he took 6 lessons in 3 weeks, but dancing was something which was beyond, his imagination. Getting that rhythmic motion, so dancing with the rhythm, dancing with the tune was not meant for him. I could not follow the piano and hence found it impossible to keep time. So he says that I just did not know how to keep in touch with the piano and that sync was totally missing. What then was I supposed to do? The recluse in the fable kept a cat to keep off the rats, and then a cow to keep the cat with me, and a man to keep the cow, and so on. My ambitions grew like the family of the Philippines. I thought I should learn to play the violin in order to cultivate an ear for Western music. So I invested another £3 in a violin and something more in fees. I sought a third teacher to give me lessons in elocution and paid him a primarily fee of a guinea. He recommended Bell's Standard Elocutionist as the textbook which I purchased, and I began with a speech of. So he talks about a story, about the story of a recluse. Recluse refers to a hermit, a saint. So there was a man who had a cat to keep off the rats. In order to protect his house from rats, he had kept cats. So the rats would go away. A cow to feed the cat with the milk. Now since he had cats, he needed milk to feed those cats. So what did he do for that? For that he kept cows with himself. And a man to keep a cow. Now since he had cows, he needed some man to look after the cows and to milk the cows. For that he kept a man, and the cycle went on. Gandhiji says that I felt my ambitions, my wishes were actually growing like that of that hermit, like that of a recluse. In order to achieve one thing, he needed something else. In order to achieve the second thing, he needed the third thing, and so on and so forth. Gandhiji thought that he was not able to dance well because he did not understand music. So he thought that he should learn how to play violin so that he could cultivate an ear for Western music. Cultivate an ear means so that he would develop an interest in Western music and would actually learn how to understand that. So Gandhiji invested another £3 in a violin, and after he had bought a violin for himself, he wanted a teacher also to give him lessons in violin, so he paid the fee of the teacher. The third teacher that he wanted for himself, one was for dance, second was for violin. The third teacher that he decided to keep for himself was for giving him lessons in elocution, to teach him the art of speech. And obviously he says that I paid him a fee of a dinar. Now this is basically shillings. Okay. So he paid him a considerable amount as a fee. This teacher recommended that he should read a book which was written by Bell. The name of that book was Standard Elocutionist as the textbook. So that should be the book Gandhiji needs to follow. Gandhiji purchased that book and he started reading that book. The first speech that he read was that of Hitler. But Mr. Bell rang the bell of alarm in my ear and I awoke. So, then what happened? Mr. Bell, he actually woke him up because he had slept. Gandhiji slept after reading that speech of Pitt. Rather than learning anything, he actually fell asleep. I had not to spend a lifetime in England. I said to myself, what then was the use of learning elocution? And how could dancing make a gentleman of me? The violin I could learn even in India. I was a student and ought to go on with my studies. I should qualify myself to join the Inns of Trade. If my character made a gentleman of me, so much the better. Otherwise, I should forego the English. But after being involved with all these things, Gandhiji realized that he did not wish to spend his time in England. He had come there only as a student. He did not wish to live there, to die there. What was the use of learning elocution then? He then thought, how could dancing make him a gentleman? And the violin that he was learning, he decided that he could learn that in India as well. He finally realized that he had come there as a student and should continue with his studies. I should qualify myself to join the Inns of the Court. So, Inns of the Court was that reputed organization that every child pursuing law going to England wanted to be a part of. So, he thought that my ambition should be to join the Inns of Court rather than learning dancing, elocution, and French, and so on and so forth. If my character made a gentleman of me, so much better. He also thought that let my character make me a gentleman. Rather than dance and elocution and French, I would want people to call me a gentleman for my character. Otherwise, I should forego the English. So he thought if my character is able to make me a gentleman, very good. Otherwise, I'm going to just forget about being a gentleman. These and similar thoughts possessed me, and I expressed them in a letter which I addressed to the elocution teacher, requesting him to excuse me from further lessons. I had taken only 2 or 3. I wrote a similar letter to the dancing teacher and went personally to the violin teacher with a request to dispose of the violin for any price it might fetch. She was rather friendly to me, so I thought I told her how I had discovered that I was pursuing a false ideal. She encouraged me in the determination to make a complete change. So, these and there were some similar thoughts which totally overshadowed Gandhiji, and I expressed them in a letter which I addressed to the elocution teacher. So he wrote a letter to his teacher who was teaching him the art of elocution, and he expressed in that letter how he felt that he should not pay attention on these things and should make his character, and should build a strong character to be called a gentleman. He requested his elocution teacher through that letter to excuse him. He although agrees that he had taken only 2 to 3 lessons, not more than that. I wrote a similar letter to the dancing teacher and went personally to the violin teacher with a request to dispose of the violin for any price it might fetch. So, he wrote a similar letter to his dancing teacher also. And personally, he went to his violin teacher because he could connect to his violin teacher better. So, he personally went to his teacher. He requested his violin teacher that if this violin that he had actually bought for himself, if this violin could be sold for any price, he'd be very grateful. This violin teacher was rather friendly to me. So Gandhiji said that I told her how I discovered that I was pursuing a false ideal. So Gandhiji accepted in front of his violin teacher that what he was following was actually false. Pursuing means to become like something, to go ahead in some direction. So the ideal, the aim that Gandhiji had kept in his mind was actually not appropriate for him, and this is what he had discovered. This violin teacher encouraged Gandhiji that, she told Gandhiji that I want you to study as much as you can, and I wish you all the success to bring about a complete change in yourself rather than going for these dancing and elocution skills. The infatuation must have lasted about 3 months. The punctiliousness in dress persisted for years. But henceforth, I became a student. So he says that infatuation, that liking I had started developing for the English culture, that lasted for just 3 months. So after 3 months, I stopped liking the English culture. But the punctiliousness in the dress, the kind of dressing sense that I had imbibed, had inculcated from the English culture, that lasted for years. I continued, I loved to be dressed up in that way. But henceforth, from that day onwards, I finally became a student. So, my dear students, written by M.K. Gandhi, The story is a small part from his life, his autobiography, in which he tells us how once he decided to imitate an English gentleman. All this started when he was following vegetarianism and his friend did not want that to happen. His friend took him to a very big restaurant where Gandhiji embarrassed him by asking the waiter what food, was he offering him. Was it vegetarian or was it a non-vegetarian food? This embarrassed Gandhiji's friend a lot, and Gandhiji later on decided that if he cannot leave vegetarianism, at least he will develop some qualities in himself so that he can match with the polished society of England. He decided to learn dancing, he decided to learn French language, and he decided to learn elocution. All these things he sought a teacher for himself in order to learn all these things. When it came to dancing, he thought he did not match the steps because that rhythmic sense was missing in him. Then he decided to learn violin first so that he would get interested in the Western culture. He bought himself a violin, he hired for himself an instructor. He decided to learn elocution, he bought a book for himself, but he fell off his feet on hearing even the first speech. That is when Gandhiji realized that it is your character that should make you a gentleman rather than these external things. And then he decided to write a letter to his teachers to inform his teachers that he would no longer be continuing with his dance, his elocution and his violin classes. And he also tells us by the end of the chapter that although his liking for the English culture did not continue for long, but the dressing sense that he had developed, that he really liked and he continued. So my dear students, with this we come to the end of the explanation of the chapter. We are going to discuss the question answers of this chapter in the next video. So I will see you all now in my next lecture. Thank you.